Big glutes. It's what we all dream of. And for some people, just glancing in the direction of a dumbbell will achieve them. But for others, no matter how much blood, sweat, and tears goes into those workouts, nothing. If anything, your genes are looser than ever. You probably might start to ask yourself, is it just my genetics? Am I doomed to have a pancake butt forever? Well, I have some good news, and actually some quite terrible news. When it comes to your glute size, we face two major genetic hurdles. First, your fat distribution. Your genetics really predetermine where your body stores fat and whether that fat gets stored in your glutes or not. Second, muscle responsiveness to resistance training. Research shows that when following the exact same training program, people can be responsive, hyper-responsive, or not responsive at all. For example, one study on bicep growth showed that after a 12-week period, some participants gained over 59% more muscle, while others actually lost muscle by the end of the study, even though they were all untrained at the start, so we would at least expect to see a little bit of growth there. And unfortunately, it's not just for biceps. Another study looking at quad growth saw the same trend, with 17 out of 66 people being non-responsive to training. But here's the good news. Even if you weren't blessed with the genetics, you can still build a pretty impressive backside following a few key steps. First, we need to pick the right exercises based on how the glutes actually work. The glute maximus, the main glute muscle, mainly works to extend the hip. The glute medius and minimus, the two smaller glute muscles, also help with abduction and stabilization, especially when you're walking or balancing on one leg. It essentially prevents you from falling onto your side when you're just on one leg at a time. So in order to build the glutes effectively, we need to train these functions properly, making sure that every single exercise loads the glutes as effectively as possible. This means picking movements that let you lift heavy, go through a full range of motion, and ones you can keep getting stronger on over time. But because we're really trying to cheat the system here, we need to take it one step further. We also need to consider resistance profiles, which is essentially just how much tension the glutes experience at different points in the movement. For our case, it's very important we train the glutes in their lengthened position and also their fully contracted position or their shortened position. Training the glutes through their full contractile range and hitting all our bases here. Now, this doesn't mean constantly switching exercises. You'll get the best growth from just a few key movements that provide the best leverage to load the muscle and take a few reps shy of failure. First, let's start with our lengthening movement. The best options for this are deep squats and deadlift variations such as the RDL, both of which emphasize loading the glutes in their fully lengthened position. For simplicity, my personal top pick for this category would be the Romanian deadlift. It minimizes knee flexion, meaning your quads don't take over in the movement, keeping the focus on the glutes. It also reinforces proper hip hinge mechanics, which is very important to carry over into other glute movements. But wait, isn't this a hamstring exercise? Well, yes and no. The RDL trains both the hamstrings and the glutes, but you can make the glutes the primary mover if you adjust your form. First, and very importantly, keep a slight bend in your knees. Then, push your hips back to initiate the movement rather than just bending forward. Your torso here is basically just along for the ride. It shouldn't be moving the weight directly. Roll the bar down your legs until around just past the knee or mid-shin height. This will depend on how flexible you are. And then to get out of that bottom position, thrust your hips forward like you kind of would in a hip thrust. To help cue this movement, think about spreading the floor apart with your feet as you lower down and then thrust explosively back up. Next up, we have our movement that loads the glutes in their shortened position. Of course, it's probably no surprise that the hip thrust is my top pick. Unlike squats and deadlifts that load the glutes primarily in a lengthened position, the hip thrust generates peak force at lockout. To set this up properly, place your upper back against a bench or a support, ideally around armpit height. Set your feet shoulder width apart, making sure that your shins remain vertical or at around 90 degrees at the top of the movement. Now, there are two key ways to drive the weight up here, the hinge method and the scoop. For the hinge method, keep your torso neutral and hinge around your back support to drive the weight up. This movement is slightly more hip dominant and resembles a hinging pattern movement like a deadlift to get the weight up. If you do find yourself hyperextending your lower back at the top of the movement to try and reach full lockout, try tucking your pelvis slightly at the top instead. You should really visualize scooping the weight up instead of just hinging it up from the hips. And lastly, we have our unilateral movement. Since single leg exercises require more stability, the glute medius and minimus naturally become more involved when doing movements such as these. One of the best unilateral exercises exercises here is the reverse lunge. Going backwards instead of forwards can help us minimize knee flexion, which would lead to more quad involvement, and load the glutes as much as possible. Start the movement by hinging at the hip slightly and sitting back into your working leg. As you return to the starting position, think about pushing through the heel and the midfoot of your front leg. And now we have our 3 basic exercises all set up. We have arguably our most crucial and important step: programming and adjusting. One of the biggest limitations of the training studies I mentioned earlier was that every single participant was following the same program. This means that the results only really reflected how they responded to that specific program, not how they respond to training in general. And this is why some people appear to be non-responders. Not because they can't build muscle or strength, but because that particular program wasn't the right fit for them. I mean, research shows that some people that don't respond that well to moderate load training thrive on low load training, and vice versa. This shows us that individual responses to training isn't fixed, and largely depends on the stimulus applied and how your body responds to that stimulus. So how do we know what training style works best for us? Well, keep it simple and work your way up. Start with a baseline, track your progress, and then adjust from there. So step 1, the baseline. Pick 1 to 3 glute exercises per workout. Perform 6 to 10 sets each week, split across 2 to 3 sessions. These sessions spaced around 48 hours apart. Use a 6 to 8 rep range in each set and take every set around 1 to 3 reps shy of failure. You don't need to go to complete failure to build muscle. 1 to 3 reps is fine. Step 2, track your progress. Monitor the weight you lift and the reps that you're doing each week. And step 3, adjust as needed. If you're constantly progressing either through your rep range or adding weight each week or bi-weekly, then your volume is probably in its sweet spot. But if your progress stalls or you finish your workout feeling like you could have done much more, then maybe add another set and reassess. If you're struggling to recover, try reducing your weekly training volume by a set or 2, or lower your session frequency. And if you don't respond well to the 6 to 8 rep range, it's hurting your joints, or you just don't enjoy lifting heavy, then try lighter loads and higher rep ranges, still going around 1 to 3 reps shy of failure. The absolute key here is just to track how your body responds and adjust based on that over time. This way you will find the optimal training volume for your body, ensuring consistent progress while avoiding unnecessary fatigue and wasted effort. And now we have our glute training completely nailed. It's time to connect the rest of the dots. First, we have nutrition. Simply put, if you're not eating enough, you won't grow. To support muscle growth, aim to eat at least at maintenance calories. While it's possible to build muscle while being in a calorie deficit, research shows that above 500 calories below maintenance, muscle growth becomes blunted. So to maximize progress, make sure you're in a moderate calorie deficit. And for protein, a solid target for most individuals is around 1 gram per pound of body weight. Next up, we have recovery. Don't skip your rest days. It doesn't make you David Goggins, it just affects the amount of energy you can put into your next workout, which is especially heartbreaking when we need all the energy we can get to grow these glutes. Sleep also plays a massive role in recovery, and if you're not getting around 8 to 9 hours each night, don't panic. Just try adding an extra hour onto what you're currently getting. And finally, time. The one thing no person wants to hear, but muscle growth doesn't take months, it takes years. The more time and consistency you put into your training, the better your results will be. Even those labeled as non-responders, when continuing to follow the same program, become responders when they train for up to 24 weeks compared to just 12. Also, stop comparing yourself to the genetic freaks you're seeing online. They aren't normal representations of what real people actually look like, and that is exactly why people like their posts and the algorithm pushes them onto your feed. We as humans have such a bad tendency to be ridiculously too hard on ourselves. You probably think your genetics are much further below average than they actually are. So go into this with the confidence that you can achieve a good result, and even if you don't, you're improving your health along the way. I really hope this video helped you guys see that all hope is not lost. And if you follow the steps outlined in this video, maybe you will grow the glutes that you've always dreamed of. And if not, then we're literally living on a floating rock where nothing matters anyway. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I will catch you guys in my next one.